Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, my name is Pankaj Dhingra, a proud Fintrammer and your faculty for Strategic Business Leader exam. Welcome. Welcome to the first session of Strategic Business Leader series. Today, we'll be starting off with the syllabus area A. But before we really jump on there, I just want to take a step back and talk about how will we gonna be proceeding on these sessions. We as Fintram, we are very much aligned and very much concerned with whatever ACCA has as far as syllabus area is concerned. So what we have done is we have ensured that anything and everything that you learn with us in terms of these sessions should be very much aligned to the syllabus areas that is being published by ACCA. And that is the way we'll operate. What we have done in our sessions is that you will learn each and every session basis the syllabus area that ACCA has. So we have in together, in SBL exam, we have syllabus area A to H, and that is what we will do when we'll start off these sessions. We'll start off with syllabus area A and we slowly and steadily move on to syllabus area H. As we proceed further or as we proceed on, you would realize that the way the ACCA has given their syllabus area, it is very much logical in terms of understanding all of the nuances what a strategic business leader should understand. So you would also get to know as we proceed step by step into the syllabus areas, and of course out of the syllabus areas moving on from one syllabus area to the other, you would realize that what is the logical progression that you're having as far as your own evolvement is concerned as a strategic business leader. And that is what we'll do. So we'll start off with the syllabus area A and we'll move on, as we go further. Each syllabus area would have some sessions. So not like I cannot complete one syllabus area in one session. So what we have done is we have divided each syllabus areas into specific sessions and we will complete all those sessions to complete one syllabus area. So what we have in store today, my friend, we have syllabus area A. Yes, my friend, we'll be starting off with the syllabus area A, which is leadership. We will be dividing, so these are the broad three topics that we have in leadership, which is we will be touching and starting today with the qualities of leadership. Then we'll jump onto the leadership and the organizational culture. Culture is the supreme thing for any strategic business leader to be successful. Of course, he has to have the quality of the good leader, which of course anyone needs to have if you really want to perform well in an organization. But it is all the more important for any strategic business leader is to understand what kind of organization culture he's getting in. And I can, talk on various nuances and various personal examples also in terms of, what these areas are as we go further. But important for you to know is that organization culture is one of the super important thing that you really need to know. And we'll get into detail as we go there. Then we'll touch upon the professionalism, ethical code and the public interest. Now, this is something which is very logical and very generic also. It is not something that will be new to you or it is not something that you would not have heard anywhere. It is a very generic thing. But of course, the way the examiner asks on these things and the way the exam really wants you to understand these things is something that we'll talk on. And of course, we'll talk on with the various practical examples in the industry, whatsoever those areas are. Of course, we have divided for the ease of understanding and grasping this material, we have divided this professionalism into two sessions. So in together, we'll have 4 sessions in this syllabus area A to really conceptuate and capture anything and everything that is related to syllabus area A, which is leadership. But before we get on there, one thing that I really want to talk on, and I think that is something as a premise of our sessions that we should be really aware and really work through is, strategic business leader exam is not an exam of theory. They will never ask you theory. So they will never ask you, for example, today whatsoever we learn in terms of the traits, the qualities, the theories of the leadership, the examiner is never going to ask you about the theoretical things. That is the way we'll get prepared for this exam. We will also not learn theories for the purpose of answering theories, but we will learn theories from the standpoint of practical implication of it, so that you're well prepared from the examination standpoint as far as anything is related to practical scenario. So what we really want to talk on, why I'm really talking on this is because what we have done is we have ensured that entire curriculum that we'll read is something that is completely practical and real life kind of a scenario, rather than being a theoretical class or a theoretical session which effectively will not take us anywhere, because this exam is not going to be a theoretical exam. This exam would gonna be an exam wherein they'll give you a real life situation and of course a case which will have a scenario to deal with XYZ, and you as the strategic business leader there in that point in time have to discuss, think and talk on all of those areas that have been given in the question as far as your theory and the knowledge is concerned. So you will have that in mind, but you will apply that practically onto those questions and answer that, given that situation is a situation which you might face when you will hit the industry. That is the beauty of this exam, that they do not, while of course they would certainly want you to go through the entire theoretical concepts and the knowledge and the curriculum and so on and so forth, but the intention is that you really understand how these theories will be applied in a practical or a real life scenario. And that is what the entire curriculum of Intram is all about strategic business leader. We will ensure that we talk so many things, and of course I will talk on so many things from my real life experiences, whatsoever I have handled in various corporates, being in board, being in such as senior leadership forums, what all I have learned, how we have dealt with the problem, what all situations we have seen, what kind of frauds we have seen, what kind of practicalities we have seen, what kind of issues that we have observed, what kind of cyber security threats we have observed, and so on and so forth. There are so many things that we'll talk on in terms of practical scenario, and then aligning that with the theory that we have in order to understand as to what exactly it entails for us to be well prepared from the practical scenario handling standpoint. We will touch upon in detail on all of these areas as we go further. What is important for you to know is that whenever you're learning and listening to these sessions, listen to the session with a practical mindset as to apply these areas onto the real life scenarios, rather than just grasping and cramming and having a rote learning of all of these concepts. Many of the past examination questions wherein they have given the real life scenario, and after which you get to see the examiner report. Many of the time examiner report specifically says that the student was really expected to apply the knowledge which he has not been able to, because of the fact that they only did the rote learning, they were not able to clear the exam. And that is what we would not want. That is what we would really help you with in terms of what you really need to know, what you really need to understand from the practical and the real life scenarios, so that you are well equipped and well prepared for handling those situations. So be with me, be with us in terms of thinking on those areas. We will talk on so many examples, so many areas. We'll talk on so many developments happening in the industry, just to make you at par and abreast with all of the changes that you really need to know for. All that you need to know is when you're here, when you're listening to the session, my friend, listen to the session. Do not get into your Facebooks, do not get into your WhatsApps of the world. Not required. When you're here, I would require 100% concentration here, my friend. The more you listen me, the many time you listen me, you'll get to understand the scenarios much better than anybody else, so as to handle that in the best possible way. So be with me, and of course bear me in terms of getting into these details, and I'm sure you'll like it, and I'm sure you'll be able to handle this exam in the much better fashion. So without wasting any time, my friend, let's just jump on into my first topic, the first session of the day, which is leadership. Now, what exactly is the leadership? What is leadership? Who is the leader? Can I ask you who's the leader? So I'll give you an example, and that's the real life example that I had. We went to we went on a vacation, of course, with my family, and I have 2 kids, 2 boys. We went to a vacation, and we were sitting on the breakfast table. And I was having conflicts and so on and so forth. And my son was, of course, demanding some things, few things, X, Y, Z, and the guy was not having it, and he was like really, I would say, showing all the tantrums and everything. So we were like really struggling in terms of controlling him. And at the same, just for a moment, my wife became like, what, nothing doing, if not doing that, get lost, and this and that, and they were like, oh, they got mellowed down, and they were like, he was not talking to anyone, but they were like it is what it is, and now mom is in a different tangent, so better not mess with her, and let's sit, relax, and let's keep quiet. So he was like, no, I'm not talking to anyone, and this and that. And that point in time, he said one thing to the mom, saying that, mom, don't really drive us crazy, and so on and so forth. So I just in order to just relax them and make them more comfortable, I asked them, and I asked my younger one, do you know what the driving is? Do you know what the leader is? Do you know what the leader is? What I was trying to do was, I was trying to portray my wife to be a leader. So I was like, asking him like this, that, what the leader is? And he kept quiet for a while, because he was not talking, and of course not in the good talking terms. But within like a fraction of a second, he said, yes, Dad, I know. Leader is Iron Man. I was like, really? Do you think leader is Iron Man? Yes, Dad. Leader is Iron Man. He can drive anybody anywhere. He can pick up somebody and he can take somebody anywhere, and so on and so forth. So think about how he understood the meaning of drive, in terms of driving somebody from here to there, a different place, and so on and so forth. And after that, I asked my elder son, why don't you speak on this? Who do you think the leader is? He's a smart guy, right? He always waits for the younger one to respond first, and then he will think and he'll respond. And then after a fraction of a second, he said, Dad, I think leader is my monitor. What does that mean? Because he drives us to do all the good things in the class. He drives us to not to do bad things in the class, and so on and so forth. So he's like effectively pushing us to behave rightly. That's what he understood with the meaning of drive, and that's what he understood what is relevant for him in the parlance of a leader. But after a few minutes or few seconds, if I may say, he again said, no, Dad, I don't think it is monitor. I think it is mom. Why? Why mom? Because mom drives us crazy, Dad. I was quiet, but I said, speak slow. Otherwise, something might happen. Speak slow. No, she really drives us to anything that she wants, and so on and so forth. And then after a few seconds, said, Dad, I also think that leader is you. I said, how come? Because you change the gears when mom is driving. I was stunned. I was quiet. And after a while said, stop being politically correct, my friend. That's not acceptable. I asked you a very simple question. Who do you think the leader is? And then he laughed. He had a cunning smile on his face, and he said, I don't know that. That is what the irony of the situation is. That is what the problem is. You do not have an exhaustive or a unique definition of a leader. Leader is a very, 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 I would say, fluid term in terms of understanding who the leader is. Everybody understands leader in its own ways. Everybody understands leader basis the traits that he foresee in someone that he would like to be. That is what the irony of the situation is. And that is what you need to understand, my friend, that leadership is not something which is very, very, very vacuumed or a very framework-oriented concept. Leadership is a very broad concept. Anybody and everybody can be a leader in a different shape or format. Anybody and everybody can have those traits. It all depends, in terms of who considers you to the leader, considering what you're delivering and what the other person is really looking at that point in time. As what my son said, Iron Man can also be a leader, and of course my mom can also, his mom can also be a leader, and his dad can also be a leader. I don't know what he was doing, but of course it is what it is. That is what I really want to touch upon and ask you who the leader is. If you really think about what I just mentioned, and in the form of an example, and see these photographs in terms of whatsoever I have displayed over here, whether it is Narendra Modi of the world, whether it is Barack Obama's of the world, or Mahatma Gandhi's of the world, whosoever the person is, of course, with due respect to all of these personalities, everybody is a leader in its own respect. Everybody is a leader in its own way. including somebody like a Dhoni, somebody like Manmohan Singh, somebody like the Trumps of the world, somebody like Rahul Gandhis of the world. They all have their own traits, they all have their own qualities which some or the other people would want to have. Now I'm not getting into that somebody is good or somebody is bad. All I'm trying to say is that leader is a leader in terms of the traits or the qualities that they display. Now somebody can be a universal leader because everybody wants like them, but somebody can be leader in its own ways, because of course they do display not all but some of the traits that they have, and so on and so forth. It's just an example in terms of giving you a perspective that leadership is a very vast definition. Leadership I cannot give an exhaustive definition of a leadership as to what the leadership is. And that's where the starting point is. That's where the starting point should be in terms of understanding who the leader can be or who the leader is, and so on and so forth. We will get into the details as to what the material says from the standpoint of leadership. Starting point, of course, is to understand that leadership is something which is not very exhaustive in terms of definition, and it is not very a framework oriented concept. It is a smart concept in terms of displaying the traits and so on and so forth. So we'll get onto it. Moving further, we'll start off with the traditional and the trait theories. Now you know what? Somewhere this leadership thing got started in a way that what is a leader? Who can be a leader or who is a leader? Some of the traditional theories, when it got started off, of course, says few things. That initial belief of who the leader is was that leaders are born, but they're not made. As in you're born with some leadership traits, and you're born to be the leader. You cannot acquire the skills. That was the mentality with which we all started off with, saying that leader is not something which you can acquire, or leadership traits are not something that you can acquire. Was this a correct statement? Absolutely not. But if you see now, absolutely not. But that's what we started off with. They specifically said that, of course, in order to be a leader, you should have some physical traits such as drive, energy, appearance, height. Everybody knows that. But does that really need for you to be a leader? If that would have been the case, Mahatma Gandhi was never been a leader. But he was, right? He was an outstanding leader in terms of what he brought on the table. Personality traits such as adaptability, enthusiasm and self-confidence was something that was called out that point in time. I somehow feel that these traits, personality traits such as adaptability, enthusiasm, self-confidence is something which is warranted even now. So it is not something that was being required traditionally. Everybody and anybody who really wants to be a good leader and really wants to do well in the life in terms of doing and bringing things on the table, he really need to be adaptable. He really need to have the enthusiasm of doing things and doing things the way the people want, and of course the folks want, and have the self-confidence of doing things. So nothing new per se. Some of the social traits that were being called out that point in time was that you need to be cooperative, you need to be tactful, you need to have a courtesy, and you should have the administrative ability. I somewhere feel that I think the way we started off with, or the way the discussion started off as to what these things are, is absolutely right. That point in time, we were like evolving as a leader. This leader as a concept was also evolving, and directionally what was being said that point in time is absolutely right. That of course you really need to have those skills as far as the cooperation is concerned, the tactfulness is concerned, the courtesy is concerned, the administration ability is concerned. You really need to have that in order to demonstrate good ability or a good leadership skill. All that I'm not agreement with is, of course, that leaders are born but not made. That is something that really doesn't go well with me. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't go well with you also at this point in time, because we all know that anybody and everybody can acquire a skill of a leadership in terms of demonstrating the traits what a leader needs to have. And we all are the testimony to the fact that the way we have changed ourselves in terms of delivering and being there in terms of where we are. Many of the arguments were challenged. We all understand that. Of course, they should be challenged. One can acquire many of these skills and learn them. That was the biggest argument at that point in time, that we do not agree to this, considering that we do feel that you can acquire the skills. It should not be the only thing that is the birth. So birth should not be the only thing. You have the reason, or you have the ability. If you have the ability, you will You will acquire the skills and you will become the leader. So this should not be something that should be related to your birth. Having said that, that's where we started off with. But then we become more mature, my friend. Then we grow. We grew in terms of, how should we be thinking about leadership as a concept. And then came the behavioral theories. Some of the behavioral theories that came in that point in time was, what is the leadership style? What are the behavioral theories? Ashridge Management College brought in few theories that we should be talking about. I'll highlight that. They said that leaders are the one, or what they said, the types of leaders are the one. One can be autocratic, which is the one who tells. One can be persuasive, which is the one who sells. One can be participative, which is the one who consult, and one can be democratic, which is the one who joins. So we'll see as to what these areas are, but see where we are going. We started off with, of course, that leaders are born. Then we learned that kind of theories that came around in terms of what kind of leaders are, and then of course we'll move forward in terms of how we evolved overall. Important right now is that what does this mean from somebody saying that leaders can be autocratic, persuasive, participative, and democratic. Now, what does this mean? And I'm sure, when you will go back and look onto your own office framework or your own work framework in terms of, where you're working right now at this point in time, if you are, you will yourself get to know that these traits are not uncommon. These traits are very common in people in terms of they being autocratic, or they being democratic, or they being participative or persuasive, and what's on. You will find all different kind of leaders being existing even at this point in time in terms of these definitions are concerned. So I would say these definitions are very much true even at this point in time in terms of how we consider a leader to be. We'll take on the first, which is autocratic leader. My way or the highway, my friend. You know what? My way or highway. Obey as I say, and this is the classical picture that I have for you. Obey as I say, otherwise get lost. It's not happening. The classical term is, which is being used by all of the folks is my way or highway. Either do what I say or get lost. That's how it is. That is the style of leadership, or that is the style of an autocratic leader who is very much adamant on his own style. An autocratic leader is the manager makes all the decisions and issues the instructions which are to be obeyed without any question. And I somehow also feel that this is the least productive way of managing a team or managing an organization. You cannot get the best out of the people if you always say that, this is the best way of doing it. Just do it as I say, and so on and so forth. People feel suffocated. People do not feel that they can add value. They can add their own perspective, which is something completely unproductive in the long run period. So ensure that something like this, if you see, you are able to call it out. Let's move ahead. Persuasive. Now this is, I personally feel that persuasive leadership style is the typical leadership style that is available in the market, in the industry, as far as the overall leadership is concerned. Now, what this style says is that bulls for sale. That's how I'll comment that it is always like management has decided something that they want to do it. Now they have two ways of doing it. One being autocratic, saying let's just do it, otherwise you're out. Or another way of doing it is that they know that they want to do this, but what they do is they have decided that, but then they will motivate people that why this is important for you and why you should do this. But they will do ultimately that thing only, not anything else. So effectively what they are doing is they are doing what they have decided, but it is not in the autocratic way, but it is in the more in the guiding way kind of the folks kind of telling the folks and they're saying that this is good for you, this is the something that you should look upon, and so on and so forth, which I think is the most prevalent thing in the industry, wherein management has decided something and they have decided something, and then now they will give you all and every understanding or any understanding that you may need in order to be positive in that direction in terms of implementing that. So they will always do something like that because they want to do something like that, because that is how they want to do it. That's what they decided. But they really not want you to be, I would say, aggressive or be against it. So they will motivate you to understand that, motivate you to understand the benefit of it. And of course, they'll show you, of course, 10 things to understand that this is good for you and this is good for the organization and you should do it. That's another way, which is persuasive way, not persuading to understand you, but persuading to understand, to make you understand that this is what the organization need at this point in time. So it's more like, I would say it is less autocratic kind of a thing, but it's a very, it is better than that. Of course, it gives you flexibility in terms of at least getting a understanding from the management that what they're doing is for what reason. Now, that may be right, that may be wrong, but it is what it is. So at least they'll share with you and motivate you in terms of understanding that nuance and understanding why they're doing that, and so on and so forth. So what is persuasive style? Persuasive style is where manager still makes all the decisions but believes that team members must be motivated to accept them in order to carry them out properly. So it's more like they will motivate you because they know that you can only carry out that properly if you're motivated. If you're not motivated, then it is going to be killing for you, or it is going to be killing for them in the long run, and they will not be able to get the best out of it. So they understand that, and that is the reason they always work towards that. Moving forward, we have participative style. Now this is something which I always like to have. I always love to have it in terms of saying that this is the best approach to follow for anyone, as far as the team management is concerned. But what is this? Participative style, where manager confers with the team and take their views into account, although still retains the final say, which I think is the most preferred way, wherein instead of coming with a mindset like in persuasive thing, wherein I have decided what I have decided and I will only give you a perspective as to why it is good for you in order to motivate you for you to implement that. In the participative style, I will effectively sit with the team, converse with the team, talk to the team, take their views into account, and then decide as to what the right option or right steps would be, which I think is the beautiful way of doing it, right? At least I'm putting my brain into what exactly team wants, what exactly folks want, what exactly folks are facing at this point in time, what the issue has been, and so on and so forth, and taking that consideration into mind, I'm deciding the right course of action, which is something that all of us would surely want, right? And that's what I would call is the most preferred way. While it has its own nuance in terms of decision being delayed and so on and so forth, but I personally feel that this is the most preferred option as compared to anything that you'll need as far as the approach is concerned. So participative approach is more like, let's get together, let's understand that, and I'll decide basis whatever I've heard and whatever I feel is right at that point in time. Of course, hearing all of you, all of the nuance at that point in time, which I think is a beautiful way of really getting onto the solution. Coming on to the democratic style, I think this picture says so, which is, as in picture says it in entirety as to what the democratic style is, wherein leader and team member make decision together on the basis of consensus, which I personally feel is not very nice way of deciding, considering especially that you will delay the decisions at all, a lot. If you go this way, wherein everything and anything is being decided democratically, everybody votes and the maximum of the consensus really moves on. It's good to be on the theory, but practically it is very difficult to implement and very difficult to really get the right solution, especially from the context of the fact that you may not be able to decide everything by this route. So it's not that great, I would say, as far as decision making is concerned. But however, it is what it is. So we have learned the democratic style, we have learned the participative style, we have learned the persuasive style, and we have learned the autocratic style. So let's step step for a moment and talk about this from the practical application standpoint. That is what the most important thing, sir, you told us. Yes, sir, that is the most important thing. Do you think examiner will ask you, what, tell me the persuasive style of management? No. Do you think examiner may ask you that what is the autocratic style of management? No. So, sir, why are you teaching us? Then, why these concepts are required like this? Examiner may give you a scenario, right? He may give you a scenario that in a particular industry or in a particular company, at some point in time, there are some leaders and leaders are behaving in XYZ way. Now that way can be autocratic, the way can be democratic, the way can be participative, and so on and so forth. Any way they can give you, or they will not call out like this, but they'll give you different situation by which you need to guess that what kind of style of a leadership is. And then they may also give you a problem to it, saying that because of XYZ as a person, he does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, we are facing huge attrition. We are facing huge ruckus from the team that he's managing. We are facing huge issues from the governance standpoint. We are facing huge issues from the employee satisfaction standpoint, or ESAT survey that has come up has really been screwed. What to do? Now, if you really understand what kind of leadership styles are, if you really understand what these issues can be, if you really understand what style is better than the other, then you'll assess the situation. You will tell the person that, what, this is the situation wherein I would consider it to be an autocratic style of management, wherein it is always being done and everything is being done in the management way or the manager's way, causing such a dissat to an employee, and hence leading to attritions, hence leading to female employees being leaving, male employees being leaving, hence leading to the ESAT survey going down, and so on and so forth. We would suggest that manager needs to be coached, manager needs to be improved on 1, 2, 3 things. He should effectively try managing the approach which is more participative or persuasive rather than this, wherein in this approach he should be doing 1, 2, 3 things, and so on and so forth. And this will give you 1, 2, 3, 4 benefits. That is what is needed from you. That is what is required from you. You are not required to tell the examiner that this is what the democratic approach is, or this is what the persuasive approach is, or this is what the participative approach is. No, not required. What is required is that you should be able to practically implement this onto a scenario. And we'll do enough in the questions that we'll practice. In fact, the question marathon that is coming up, video question marathon is again something as a concept that we have built up, wherein I myself have done so many questions, the concept questions, the exam standard questions, the past examination questions, taking all these consideration into mind, and of course various other things that we'll learn as we go forward. I'll myself do these questions in terms of telling you as to what should be and how you should be targeting that as a question, how you should be targeting that as an answer, and so on and so forth. So we'll be talking that in detail, but for now, every and any concept that we see, we should certainly think about the practical implication of it or the practical application of it. I'll keep telling you that, I'll keep moving on in that direction, I'll keep sharing that with you. But my dear friend, you really need to think this exam from the practical scenario standpoint. You should not be mugging up, you should not be having the rote learning done, as I've been saying that again and again. I will be saying this again and again. It is super important for you to really know that concepts are concepts only for you to understand. Implication of this, the practical application of this is something you'll understand. I'm sure you'll, as you practice with me the question, as you'll practice with me the question marathon, you'll get more into it, you'll get more understanding of it. But be prepared, have that in your mind that all and anything and everything that we need to do is the practical implications of the concepts that we will learn. Is that clear? We are Fintrammer, sir. We understand that. Absolutely, my friend. You are Fintrammer, and I really have to make you understand this, that this is the super important thing. Should we move forward? Absolutely. Alright, so we'll start it off with the traditional theories. We moved on to different kind of leadership styles. Now we have moved on to more maturity stage, which is like contingency or contextual theory. It is the way it is called, which is acceptability and adaptability is the key. Wherein one thing that is required from every leader is that they should be acceptable and adaptable. They should be acceptable and adaptable. They should be acceptable and adaptable. What does that mean? There are no golden rules that will fit every situation. We all understand that. And how to lead and manage is contingent on the situation. Completely agree, no disregard to it. Contingent on the situation. No problem. Different leadership styles are needed at different times. Leader has to be flexible and has to play a balancing act. I couldn't agree more with this statement. The contingency theory or the contextual theory, what it says is that anybody and everybody can be a leader, because if the person can be adaptable and the person can be acceptable, that is what he needs in order to be a good leader. He has to demonstrate the balancing act, which is like balancing the negatives and the positives. I have to balance it. I have to balance the situations. It cannot be that I'm more driven by one side of the table, which is it is not right. And at the same time, leaders has to be very, very, very flexible. Let me give you an example to this. Especially with the balancing act. I was heading the finance of a financial services firm, and on that financial services firm was giving the incentives, or I would say key variable incentives to some key people in the sales force. Now, Salesforce was getting incentives on the basis of sales that they were making, and the sales was divided into various categories, as in a new buyer or a new customer, new business, wherein they are able to sell new business to the new customer, so incentive is something different. Then if they are able to sell new business to a old customer, as in a new business which company has really started, into the old customer, the customer that company already has, then the incentive rate was different, and so on and so forth. So it was like different methodologies being followed for the purpose of calculating these incentives. But net, in nutshell, the situation is that company is paying incentives to the sales force for making and cracking the sales, okay, which is fine. And at the same time, company is changing the technology platform, okay, which is good. Technology platform is being opted to be changed for some very strategic reasons, because the technological platform that company had at that point in time was something that we were struggling with, and we were not able to really capture everything that we needed, especially from our growth standpoint, which was like a big concern. And hence it was a strategic decision being taken at the board, and I was there at that point in time in that board, in terms of doing this in this way, okay, which is fine. But because of this strategic change, the technological change, we were not able to give service to the customers for XYZ time because of various nuances, or it was a major change which really brought in some big time issues onto the table, due to which we were not able to serve few of our key clients, and because of which key clients that in that quarter or 2 quarters of a time, they really didn't do business, or they really stopped doing business with us and they went to somebody else. Because of that, my sales team were not getting incentives, because they were not able to make sales. However, there was a big time argument coming from the sales team that is it their fault? Is it something that we should be penalized for? Because it is the organizational decision. Why should we be penalized for the change that is being made at the organization level, and so on and so forth? So if you really take a strategic leader kind of a position over here and hear out the argument, their argument is right. Their argument is right in a way that it is not their fault. They are absolutely right at their position. Fault is, of course, of the nuance that is being created because of the decision that is being taken, which is beyond their control. So why should they be penalized? Which is I think they're absolutely right there. But at the same time, organization is right because they are struggling any which ways in terms of implementing this. And you know what? They should certainly work towards as a team rather than you versus me. So it is the situation, and the force should also understand that, and so on and so forth. Now this is, the management is right, the sales incentive team is also right. You being the strategic business leader, what kind of role you would need to play? I being the CFO there, I being the finance head there, I had to play a very smart role in terms of managing both the ends. Otherwise, if they will go demotivated, they will not do well. If organization is exposed to the funds that they will expose to, of course, if I pay, even if they're not achieving the sales, that's not right. So what should we do? I came up with the thought, and of course I've spoken to various leaders that point in time in the management side, and of course on the sales team side. And we got into the consensus that we understood that, there's something which is beyond your control, and there's something which is not your fault, and so on and so forth. So what we agree with is that, we'll give you 50% of the incentive, the normal average incentive that you would have achieved or you have been achieving over a period of time. We'll pay you that 50%, despite the fact that nothing has been achieved, but that 50% goes from the kitty of the management, because they understand that this is not because of your fault, that 50% goes because of it. But you really need to ensure that customer starts doing business when things gets right. And you really have to work hard in terms of bringing that customer back in 2 months of time. If you're not able to bring that customer back in, say, 3 to 6 months of time, the 50% that is being paid to you needs to be paid back to the company. It's a very small thing, but I can tell you, most of the sales force, they agree to it. And we also give a condition that if everything comes back on track in 6 months of time, we are able to catch up to our sales in 6 months of time, what we are expecting to make it right now. So effectively what we're saying is that, let's say in 2 months of time they are not doing business with us, but after these 2 months of time, in 4th month of the business that they'll give us, if they're able to achieve or get the budgeted figures that we have for these 6 months, the remaining 50% that is not paid to them right now at this point in time will get paid. What I've done, I have played a balancing act to tell them that, you're right and they're also right. We give something, we have something for the benefit of organization at large, we have something for the benefit of you, we have something for all of us. That's the beauty of strategic business leader is. That's the beauty of the real leader. That you really need to be matured in terms of thinking through their perspective. You really need to be matured from thinking from the organizational standpoint. And then whatever you decide, whatever you do, should be a balancing act that should take care of the nuances, whatever possible. I told you in a very easier way, it is, but all these decisions, all these areas are not so easy to be done in an organization, are not so easy to really work through. But we still work through, things still happens. We as strategic business leader really find out these ways. And I'm sure, my friends, you will also have something like this at your hand when you will hit the industry. And all of these examples, all of these practical contexts will certainly help you to achieve and drive something rightly at that point in time. And that's what examiner wants. Examiner will also throw you something, and you have to decide that the strategic business leader. You may have to apply the contextual theory or the contingency theory, but in a way that you understand that, these theories says that the adaptability and acceptability is the key. The leader has to be adaptable, leader has to be acceptable, leader has to show the flexibility, leader has to show the balancing act. And that's what the entire contingency or contextual theory is all about. Is that clear, my friend? Absolutely. Should we move ahead? Yes, sir. Coming on to transactional and transformational leadership theory. So we started off traditionally, okay, leaders are born. We moved on to contingency or contextual theory. No, leaders are not born. They can have the traits. All they need to know is that they need to be adaptable, they need to be acceptable. I'm sure, then if they do that, they have to be showing us the flexibility skills, they have to be showing us the balancing act, and so on and so forth. Good enough, sir. Then comes the transactional and transformational theories, that leaders are transactional leaders, and leaders are transformational leaders. What is this, sir? Transactional, transformational, confusing, sir? Not at all, sir. We'll get into it, and I'm sure after 10 minutes you will say, no, nothing, sir, everything is clear, sir, and that's what it is. What is that? Transactional and transformational leaders. Transactional leaders means doing things right. Doing things right. What do transactional leaders do? Transactional leaders do things right. However, transformational leaders do the right things. Oh, sir, very confusing. Can you repeat? Yes. Transactional leaders do things right. Things are given, they do it rightly. Absolutely. Transformational leaders, they do right things. They only do right things. They do not do anything which is wrong. That's what the difference is. Transformational leaders are more thinking towards future, organization, and so on and so forth. Transactional leaders are more thinking towards the task that is being given to them. Transactional leaders are more considered about the transactions that are given to them. Transformational leaders are thinking about what should be the right transactions that they should be doing, what should be the right things that they should be doing, what is the right way of doing these things, what are the benefits of doing these things, what should be the futuristic perspective of doing these things, how can I really carry this over to the firm at large, how can I really demonstrate to the firm at large, how can I really become the culture carrier, and so on and so forth. That's what transformation leader is all about, and that is what the transactional leader is all about. Both of them are important in its own ways. Both of them, if you see through the industry, and I don't want to quote out names of the leaders categorizing into these buckets, but if you really go into the market and see through the leaders, you will find leaders who are very transactional, and you'll find leaders who are very transformational. And both the leaders are super successful in their own ways in terms of what they have really brought on table and how they have succeeded from the futuristic standpoint. But important piece to understand is that one is this and two is this. I'm not saying anybody is better than one is better than the other. I'm not saying that. All I'm trying to say is that there are two buckets of leaders. We have transactional leaders, we have transformational leaders. Transactional leaders are more concentrated on doing things in a right way. However, transformational leaders are always concerned about doing the right things. Doing right things. A very small distinction, but it really has a very deeper meaning in terms of thinking about how these two species really work. Let's get into the detail as to what the material says. Transactional leaders means doing things right. They seek improvement rather than change. Of course, as I said, they always seek improvement. They are not really the ones who really bring in change. Transactional leader focus on short term and define the existing culture. It recognizes what is that we want and ensure that we get it. They're very good in terms of implementing things. They're very good in terms of delivering what is being asked for. They exchange rewards and promises for effort. That is the typical style. I'm a transactional leader. I will motivate my team that in the same way. Do this, you'll get this. Do this, you'll get this. Achieve this, you'll get this. That's how they work on. That's how they operate on, and so on and so forth. They have the self-interest and are more passive. They have the self-interest. They always have the self-interest into it that, if I'll do this, I'll achieve this. If I will achieve this, then I'll get this, and so on and so forth. So they're very, very, very concerned in terms of their own good, which I'm not saying is bad, but that is what it is. That is what the trait is, that they're very much concerned in terms of their own good. They're very much concerned in terms of, achieving basis what they have been able to deliver, and so on and so forth. And that's what the entire transactional leadership is all about. Now, what is transformational leader? Transformational leader, on the other hand, means doing the things right. Doing the right things. I said it for transactional leader. Transformation leader is doing the right things. They will not do wrong things. They will not do something which is not good from the organizational standpoint, considering the long-term perspective. They will always do something keeping organization into their mind. They build a vision for a future, of course, energize people and manage the change. They concentrate on a long-term vision, changing the organization. Transformation leaders see the role as inspiring and motivating other to work at this level beyond mere compliance. Okay, show bigger picture versus own interest, seen as change agent and are more proactive. Is that clear? Was it something that you were not aware of? No, sir. We know this. We have seen this in the organization that we have worked for. We have already seen this. It is not new. But let's spend some time in terms of thinking through how examiner may ask us, sir, again practical implication? Yes, sir, again a practical implication, because that is the key, my friend. And the more I talk on that, more I really touch on that, more you get prepared for it in terms of how you may see something like this in the exam. And if you see something like that in the exam, how should you be able to answer it? Now think about a scenario. Examiner, again, I'm just giving some kind of scenarios, my friend, that may or may not happen to you in the exam, or something may happen in the exam which can be different. But what you really need to know is that if something like this happens in the exam, how can you best handle it? Give me a second. Sorry. Now imagine a scenario. Imagine a scenario wherein you have got a situation, and the situation is that you are given a case in which there is a leader, and leader is behaving in one of the ways, whether it is a transactional way or whether it is a transformational way. Now transactional, he will not tell you, examiner will not give you that this is a transactional leadership style, or examiner will not tell you that this is the transformational leadership style. No, examiner will only give you some kind of traits of these, as in what the person really does, in terms of transaction, what the person really does for the organization as far as change is concerned, what the person really does for the people, how he drives people, how he doesn't drive people, and so on and so forth. So he'll give you a scenario talking on various nuances, and basis those nuances, you will get to understand yourself that is this a transactional leadership style or is it a transformational leadership style. So I'm sure once you have understood the concept, once you have of course seen the lectures, at least twice, you will get to understand as to what those traits are. And of course, reading the material, you will again get to know as to what the traits are. Once you have understood that, once you have gone through that, then what is needed is that you will understand that this is what the situation is. And this is what currently I'm facing, and this is what I should be thinking about now. Considering this, what is the problem? Organization will give you a problem, that this is the problem that organization is facing. Let's say organization is facing a problem wherein they are not able to change the culture, organization goals are not being aligned, we are not able to work through the people are showing resentment in terms of the goals of an organization, the culture carriers, has a problem, and so on and so forth. So different kind of problem. And the person that is being given to you in the question is a transactional leadership style of a person. Then you know that the way that this person is operating, whether it is a CEO, CFO, CMO, whosoever the person is, that person really has to change the style in order to be more effective, in order to achieve what the organization want, especially on this side of the table. And if organization wants something on this side of the table, then the person needs to be shifting the style, or probably we'll be doing another hiring. We have to do a different hiring. This person, if we are not able to change this person, we have to do a hiring. You may have to see that, put this person on a development plan, guide him, mentor him, this. If it doesn't happen, we have to hire, that may means a cost, and so on and so forth. So you know what, you're thinking more broadly. You're thinking giving a solution. You're giving a perspective that this is what the situation is, this is what it will take you, this is where it will take you, and for not going where you're going, or for going somewhere different, you probably have to do 1, 2, 3 things. And these are those 1, 2, 3 things that can be from transformational to the transactional side, or that can be from the transactional to the transformational side, depending upon what the situation is. So you'll get to see different kind of scenarios in the exam, calling out for different solutions, and solutions can only be provided once you've read these stories, you've understood these theories, understood these examples, and of course then applying them to that scenario, applying them to that context, and giving the right solution. Is that clear, my friend? We are Fintramer, sir. We are getting ready, sir. You will get ready, my friend. It is just that we have to take it into pieces. If you have to eat the elephant, eat it in pieces. And this strategic business leader is an elephant to be eaten, and we will eat it in the best possible way. Should we move ahead? Absolutely. Coming on to some of the leadership definition that you can now really give some perspective on, or give some value on, in terms of what the leadership is. Now that we have learned the theory of the leadership, the traditional theories, the contextual contingency theory, we have seen the transactional transformation leader. We've also seen the types of leader in terms of who the leader can be. What were those types of leader, my friend? Let's remind it. No, we should be doing our lectures in a way, my friend, that we are able to revise that enough in this classes itself, that it takes as less as possible of your time when you go after this class and sleep. This should get into your blood. In the class itself, we should revise it so many times. What are the 4 styles of leadership that we did? Come on, let's revise. What are the 4 types of leadership? Sir, autocratic, sir. My way or the highway. Sir, persuasive, sir. Sir, less autocratic kind of a relationship, wherein I have decided and I will motivate my team to work that way. Very good. Participative, sir, excellent style of leadership, wherein we'll work with the team, take their perspective and then decide. Very good. What was the last one? Sir, democratic. Yes. What is there? Sir, this is where everybody will put in the vote and by consensus will decide. Not a good way, but yes, it is what it is. Absolutely. That was the 4 style of leadership that we learned. We started off traditional theory of leadership, moved on to the kind of leaderships that we have, moved on to contingency and contextual theory, then we did the transactional and the transformational leader theories. Now we have come up to, how do we define leadership? Leadership is someone who exercises influence over the other people. We all know that. Isn't that very general? Absolutely. Leadership is an effective interpersonal influence directed towards the achievement of goal or goals. Absolutely. It can be interpersonal. We should have influence. We should have goal. Interpersonal means between persons. Thus, the leader has more than one person to lead. Very generic. Influence. Influence is the power to affect others. So, one should have interpersonal relationship. One should have an influence for what? For a goal, or for the achievement of goal. Goal is the end one strives to attain. A very small and simple definition of a leadership would be someone who exercises influence over the other people, interpersonal influence directed towards achievement of goal or goals. Very generic definition, but very I would say powerful in terms of giving the right message. Effective leaders show the high standard of ethics, continuing therefore through the whole organization. Is that clear? Absolutely, sir. Should we move ahead? Yes, sir. Coming on to role of a leader. Role of a leader. What is the role of a leader? Role of a leader is to be the entrepreneur. Be the innovators, willing to take risks and generate new ideas to create unique and potentially profitable solution to modern day problems. Develop a communication strategy. When I say communication strategy, what does that mean? Develop and communicate strategy. Communicate strategy means what? And when we'll touch upon the strategy as a chapter, you will see there are many things that we'll talk on the strategy from the communication standpoint. We'll talk in detail, in depth there in terms of what those areas are as far as the communication of the strategy is concerned. We'll get in there. But what is important role of a leader? One, of course, to be the entrepreneur, and very soon, in a fraction of a second, we'll move on to the entrepreneur as to what the entrepreneur and intrapreneur is, which is again something I really want you to understand. But important is that you really have to be the innovators who are willing to generate new ideas and create an opportunity, not only for yourself but also for the organization at large, by solving various problems at your hand. You should be able to develop and communicate strategy. If you're not a good communicator of strategy, if you're not able to communicate strategy the way the organization should be, you are failed. So you really have to show and demonstrate that skill that you can really communicate well as far as those strategy is concerned. I'm sorry. You should display the strategic values. Now, strategic values is something, and we'll cover up many of these things when we'll, of course, touch upon the public interest in this session itself, as in this syllabus area itself. But important is that you should always display the code of ethics. You should always display the governance aspect. You should always have the mindset of thinking about people at large, not only for yourself and for organization. So you should display the strategic values, and you should have the strong governance mindset. And again, just think about this scenario without reading the material, without getting into the depth of it. But if you really think about a scenario, if you really think about a strategic business leader or a leader of your organization or anybody's organization, if I really ask you that who the leader would be, you will yourself say that leader would be somebody who is able to make the strategy, implement the strategy, who should be a very ethical person, who should have the strong governance of the organization at large, and who should work as an innovator. Those are some normal and the basic traits what everybody and anybody expects of the leader, and that's what we have covered over here. So there is not a rocket science that we have over here in terms of you becoming a leader. It's a very generic thing, but you really need to have in a mind, because those things or these things are regularly tested in the exam in terms of thinking through, how do you see a leadership. They may not be asked like this that who you define to be a leader, but you will certainly have to touch upon these areas in terms of managing various issues that you may deal with the leadership in the exam. So think about this from that standpoint, that you may get to answer the situation in terms of improvement areas that you may have to take up from these small traits in terms of recommending in the exam as to what the leader entails to be a good leader. Should we move ahead? Yes, sir. So some of the skills of an effective leader, if you really want to be an effective leader, some of the skills that you should have. Number one, we should understand the need of the group. Being human is something that is very obvious. Many of the times you would have seen in your personal life also that if you have to become a good leader, you really have to be human first in terms of understanding what your team feels, what your team really needs, what your folks needs, what are the issues, and so on and so forth. So you really have to get into their shoes, get into the problems that they're facing, getting into how can you resolve those problems, how can you think through those problems, how do you really have the empathetic mindset as far as those areas are concerned or not, is something that everybody looks for. And those are some basic traits for you to be a successful leader there. You should certainly have the ability to solve problems, creatively take decisions, something super important. You should have the strong listening skills and ability to communicate. This is something that I really want to talk on. Many of the leaders, and I can tell you in various examples that I've seen in my life, many of the leaders are it's like you only hear to respond. You hear with an intention that you will respond. Many of the time what you really miss is that hearing is for listening. You should hear to listen what is being said and what is not being said, so that you can take the right and the appropriate action after understanding the situation at large, after understanding the situation as whole, rather than you hearing it and just responding it without really consuming it or conceptualizing it or really understanding the situation at large. And that's where a good leader makes a differentiation with a not so good leader. I'll not say bad leader, but not so good leader. And that's what you really need to understand, that in order for you to become a good leader, you really needs to ensure that you understand that you should have a very strong listening skills, because that is what can which can make you differentiate from anybody else in this world in terms of these areas are concerned. So you should be very cautious in terms of ensuring that you certainly gives a ear to the person who is asking you to really hear him, and not only ear but also a mind at that point in time, rather than only hearing to respond.
One has to be social, understood. It has to be a strategic leader, which will touch upon, when we'll touch upon strategy, we'll touch upon various aspects of strategy there. One has to be confident and disciplined, very normal, I would say trait. Emotional stability is something which should also be there. Entrepreneurial abilities is again something entrepreneur is a very upcoming term per se. So, and we'll touch upon that in a while. We should have a strong governance skill. This governance as a piece has a separate syllabus area in strategic business leader, and we'll touch upon each and every aspect of governance in terms of what does it takes for you to be strong in the governance at large, as far as the leadership trait is concerned. So we'll touch upon that, but for now it is important for you to understand that you really need to have strong governance skills in order to be doing well from the leadership quality standpoint. As per date, there are 3 principles requirement of leadership. So it's you don't have to remember the names of the people who are giving that, but it is always good to at least know what they're saying, so that at least you're able to quote it somewhere in some shape or format that this is something that leaders should be doing, which is like satisfying the task needs, as in what the task requirement is. You should be able to satisfy that. Satisfy the group's need, as in if the group that you're dealing with, you really need to understand what the issues of that groups are, what kind of problems that group has, and how can you really satisfy and answer that or resolve that. You should satisfy the individual needs. So you should move from task to group and to individual. So task is something you have, which anyway have, that's your bread and butter. You anyway have to do your task in the best possible way. The group that you're working with, of course, you should understand their requirement, understand their nuance, and work towards resolving the concerns. And then moving on to individuals, think about individuals. Individuals are the ones who will make you the leader, who will really take you to a different level. So you really need to understand in terms of what the individual concerns are, and whosoever who understand the task, whosoever who understand the group, whosoever who understand the individual and manage them better is the good strategic business leader that anyone would really want. Is that clear, my friend? Absolutely. Should we go ahead? Leadership and management. Oh. Sir, are they different? They seems to be the same, right? No. You may think it to be the same, but they are never the same. Leadership and management are always different. Speak more, sir. We are not clear. Many of the times, and that used to happen with me also, right? Many of the times when somebody used to ask me in the organization or wheresoever that who is your leader, what is the first name that comes on your mouth when somebody asks that? What is that? It'll always be a boss, right? Who is your leader? My leader is XYZ. Who is your leader? My leader is ABC. You will always quote out your boss, right? You always quote out your own supervisor, because that's the default situation or the position you give a leader to be. That is, who is my boss? He's my boss and he's the leader, right? But do you really feel that all of your bosses have been good leaders? May not be, right? Have you seen a scenario wherein somebody else, somewhere else, who is not in the reporting relationship of yours, you have really liked and being inclined to that person because that person is really adding value into you and really add something in you which you really need, or the mentorship that you really need is something being provided by that person, not your boss? Maybe, right? Very common scenario that you feel that somebody else adds more value, adds more color to your life rather than your own supervisor, and who is by default on the position of being a leader. That is what the difference in between leadership and management is. That leadership doesn't come with the position. Leadership comes with the trait. Management comes with the position, and so on and so forth. And so we'll understand more as we read. But important is that you can become a leader without having the management position or without being the supervisory relationship with you. You can certainly become a leader if you really start demonstrating those traits, start contributing to you, and so on and so forth. So you can become leader there. Leader can be manager, which is absolutely right. But manager is not necessarily a leader. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Frequently, we confuse leadership with authority. Even I used to do it. Leaders may have formal authority, but they rely in large part on informal authority. Okay. This flows from their personal qualities and action. They may be trusted, we know that, respected for their expertise, followed because of their ability to persuade. Completely agree. Real show starts at the time of crisis. Leaders do not put off their real self, however your manager can. The key point in differentiating between leadership and management is the idea that employee willingly to follow leaders because they want to and not because they have to. I will certainly have to follow my boss because I have to follow him. I have to say what he says. So that's what I'm doing. That's fine. But if I'm following somebody else, without having this supervisory relationship, that really calls out a lot, right? In terms of the traits that person is showing, or traits that person has in terms of driving me to follow him and to be like him, and of course to have the mentorship from him. And that's what the trait of a true leader is all about. That's where we'll differentiate a leadership from the management, and that's what the difference is of a leadership and a management. Should we go ahead? Absolutely. Coming on to intra and entrepreneurship. Sir, intra and entrepreneurship? What is this, sir? This is very confusing. No, it is not confusing, and it is very, very, very important as a concept that you should know what the intra and entrepreneurship is all about. Entrepreneurs are innovators. We all know that. Entrepreneurs are the one, of course, who takes on things, who takes the risk, who generate new ideas, who work on it. And many of the startups that we have seen are nothing but the entrepreneurs. So take on any names of the world, you would see those are the ones who took an idea, who has an idea, who implemented an idea, who took the risk, who delivered it, and of course made something out of like nothing to a big giant. That's what the entrepreneurs are all about. Intrapreneurs, on the other hand, are having the same traits, same risk-taking abilities, same mindset of innovating things and so on and so forth, but they're not doing everything of their own. They are into the job. So they are doing the same thing, but for an organization. That's in nutshell the only differences, or that's in nutshell the basic differences of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. So if I'm the one who has taken the risk, had an idea, innovation, I did the innovation in terms of how things are being done. I took the risk. I started off a company. I started off a business. Took the business from from X level to Y level. I'm nothing but an entrepreneur. But if I do the same kind of apply the same kind of skills and same kind of traits into a job that I manage, then I'm nothing but the entrepreneur. Over the period of time, the ask of an organization to have the entrepreneurs as the workforce is increasing because entrepreneurs are the ones who are really able to add more value to the organization, bring more force in the organization, bring more courage in the organization, bring more benefits to the organization in terms of they're really doing well. And that is the reason they're highly in demand in terms of you being showing those traits in the organization. And that is where you are being differentiated within other employees in the organization, and of course getting a very different level of growth also in an organization if you really have that spree in your mind in terms of doing well. And that's what really you would really want to inculcate in you in terms of thinking through as a concept as to what you really need to do from the entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship standpoint, and how does this differentiate. Should we see what material says? Absolutely. Intra and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are innovators, willing to take risk and generate new ideas to create unique and potentially profitable solutions to modern day problems. We all understand that. The most obvious form of entrepreneurship is starting new business, referred as a startup company. In the recent year, terms has been extended to include social and political reforms of entrepreneurial activities, which are often referred to as social entrepreneurship. Okay, entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is an employee, does not usually have any ownership. He acts as an inside entrepreneur, very, very rightly said, who focuses on innovation and creativity while operating within goal and environment of an organization. Goal and environment of an organization. That's what we spoke. Key differences, if I have to call about, from intra and entrepreneur standpoint, in terms of what those key differences are. Entrepreneur will use his own money for business. However, entrepreneur is not risking any of its own money. We all understand that. Entrepreneur is a risk taker. Entrepreneur may take risk within the corporation. However, final risk comes down to the business owners. Of course, they are the employees. Final risk is for the business owners. Entrepreneur makes the maximum gain if successful. However, entrepreneur gain is restricted. We all know that. Entrepreneur are dependent on entrepreneur, and vice versa is not true to that extent. Very simple. Exit of entrepreneur is easy. They're in a job, right? They'll shift it. So it's very easy. However, entrepreneur exit is not there. Is it difficult? No, sir. Important thing to know over here is that these are the concepts which are very, very, very modern world concepts. So entrepreneur is very, very, very heavily tested from the modern, I would say, era standpoint, because you would see some kind of traits, maybe in the exam also, wherein somebody is displaying the traits of an entrepreneur, or somebody not displaying, and you may want to recommend the person that one should really look at evolving his skill, or guiding him or mentoring him to really demonstrate these skills and become an entrepreneur. And if he does that, there are many benefits that an organization has. And you know what organization needs to do in this? Organization needs to do in these things to encourage that entrepreneurship. That is the practical implication of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship as a concept, my friend. You may get to see a situation in an exam wherein somebody is not doing something, or somebody is doing something in terms of showing an entrepreneur or entrepreneur skills, and you may have to ask out an organization that, there are ways to improve or encourage entrepreneurship, and these are things that you may do, and so on and so forth. So you may get to see that situation also in the exam. They may not ask you what entrepreneurship and what entrepreneurship is, but they give you the scenario, and then you have to think about it as to what you can recommend. That is what, I'm sure you would have observed by now, what I'm trying to do on each and every concept in a way or the other is, and I'm telling you to think about the practical aspect of it, the practical application of it, my friend. And that is what that is super, super, super important is. You don't have to mug up this, you don't have to learn this. And I will keep saying this again and again. It is super important for you, my friend, to understand that these concepts are being tested in a different way, and how can I be prepared for these things in the best possible way. Should we learn as to how ways to encourage entrepreneurship? Yes, sir. Entrepreneurs will always come up with new ideas and help to grow the business. Most of the firms need entrepreneurs to keep up with changing environment. Ways to encourage entrepreneurship includes the following. Number one, we should have an open door policy to support their staff to come up and discuss new ideas. If you will open up your policy in terms of discussing these ideas, then only people will come and discuss. If you will not open up, you will always have a closed door to these ideas, and ideas will stop coming to you. There should be a cultural shift wherein we should encourage employees to explore new ideas, which is something very, very, very prominent now in the industry. Removing administrative barriers and bureaucracy, develop a culture where innovation is valued. Now, I'll give you one example, a very practical example to it in terms of what we did. In the organization, consulting organization I worked for. We as so me being the finance head, what we tried delivering was that we really wanted firm to innovate on various practical nuances that we deal with, innovate with various issues that in finance we deal with, innovate with the manual issues that we have, the mistakes that we have, the frauds, the checks and balances, and so on and so forth. So what we did was we formed a forum within finance. So we had like various teams in finance, the accounting team, reporting team, compliance team, the tax team, and so on and so forth. So we took the representative on each and every team and of course got into one room and we made that team called Finovate, Team Finovate. So finance and innovation, we combined that and said Team Finovate. What this team was doing, this team was brainstorming their problems, brainstorming on their issues in terms of what the issues are, what the solutions can be, how can they get to have the solutions, and what does that solution entails in terms of taking help from one function from the other function, and so on and so forth. And that was the start that we made from the finance innovation standpoint. And all I can tell you is that we finally circled down on say 11 projects at that point in time that we delivered, and we really delivered well on that, and we really delivered it in a way that it became a practice of not only the APAC as a region in which I was heading, whatever I was doing that point in time, it effectively got replicated across the globe in terms of that as a practice. So what are we doing? We are effectively ensuring that we have the innovation mindset in terms of doing things and really resolving issues, resolving concerns, and really bringing things on table. And when you do that, you will see people coming up with ideas, wild ideas. You may not accept some, but you will see a very good culture there in terms of people being motivated in terms of contributing, people being motivated in terms of thinking about XYZ and so on and so forth. So that is something that can only happen to you if you really have a culture where innovation is valued. And we, of course, we rewarded the best innovation there. We rewarded the best contribution, in the innovation team, and so on and so forth. That can only and only happen if you have that mindset. But if you're not, then you're always running behind it, and people are not very open up in terms of contributing to you. Budget for the resources to develop new ideas. You should have some budget. You should let them own it. That's the key. If you really have idea from someone, make that person owner of it, and you will see a difference in terms of how that person can drive it, because that person will really own it because it is his idea. He would love to own it. He would love to manage it. You should try to identify the gems and give them time. This is again something that I learned over a period of time. If you get into those meetings, get and hear out those ideas, hear out those issues, you will get to see yourself that effectively gives you a perspective that who are the gems in your team, who are the gems in your function at large, and start investing that. It's more of investing in the gems from which may give you return from the longer term standpoint. So that again is something which is very helpful. All right, my friend, we are in the end of leadership as a session. Now is the time to practice a question. I think it is always important to at least think through how the examiner may ask you, and it is always important to at least practice that from the standpoint of question, because that certainly gives us an application mindset in terms of how do these concepts can be applied in the examination environment. So very quickly we'll move on there, but before we go on there, one thing that we really need to do is revision as to what we have done by now. So what we'll do is we'll quickly revise in terms of what we covered and what we have done so far in terms of ensuring that we are able to capture anything and everything that was being done. So we started off today, of course, with the definition of a leadership as to who leader can be, and I'm sure you have understood that it cannot be an exhaustive definition. So we started off with the leader in terms of who leader can be, and not to forget, my friend, the Iron Man, the mom, the father of the world, in terms of what my son also said. Not to forget that example, because that example really has a value in terms of you being understanding as to what those nuances are. We moved on to the traditional theories wherein we touched upon that leaders are born, not made. We touched upon some of the physical traits that they may have, some of the the social traits that they really need to have, whether it is cooperation, tact, courtesy, or concern. We touched upon that, which I think is very much relevant even right now. Then we touched upon on the leadership style and the behavioral theories, which is again something we really feel that it is prevalent right now, which is like the autocratic style, which is something that somebody tells that you should do it, my way, highway. Persuasive style, which is selling, I have decided, but I'll still sell, but you have to do this. and then coming on to participative style, which is consults, wherein I'll consult and then I'll decide, and then coming to democratic style, which is more like, let's join hands and then decide by the consensus. Then we moved on to the contextual theory or the contingency theory side of it, wherein we said that anybody can become a leader if you acquire it, and we can only acquire it if you have the acceptability and adaptability. Flexibility is the key, and not to forget that you have to play the balancing act. And of course, we ran through with the help of an example too. We moved on to the transactional theory and transformational theory, wherein transactional leaders are the ones who are like doing things right, and transformational leaders are the ones who are doing the right things. That's the key differences, and rest is something to follow, wherein we have to have transactional leaders to manage the transactions and the work that is being given, and they really do that beautifully. They're very much concerned, they're very much into it, they have their skin in the game. They will always look for having their own benefit, or they have the self-interest to it. Unlike the transformational leader who are more thinking about the organization at large, from the futuristic standpoint, they are the culture carriers. They are thinking about the big picture, not only their self-interest, and they are the change agent and always being proactive in terms of leading that. We touched upon briefly as to what the leadership trait is all about, whether it is an interpersonal relationship that they need to have, or influence that they need to have, or the achievement of the goal that they need to have in their mind in order to have a good leadership trait. Then we touched upon the role of a leader, which is nothing but being an entrepreneur. We have to have the strategic mindset, and of course ways to communicate our strategy. We have to display the strategic values, the belief, and we have to have a strong governance mindset. Skills of an effective leader, you can simply run through it. It is easy one. Leadership and management, we have understood that in detail. Leader can be a leader by default because of his positioning, but in order to be the real leader, you really have to show the trait. So the first line, which is leader can be manager, but manager cannot be necessarily a leader, it is absolutely true. One has to really demonstrate the traits in order to be very effective as a leader. Then we touched upon the intra and entrepreneurship. We have learned that who the entrepreneur is, which is more like a startup kind of an organization. An entrepreneur is having the same traits as the entrepreneur, but inside the organization as working in a job. Then we touched upon some of the key differences in terms of entrepreneur, and then ways to encourage entrepreneurship for an organization if they really want to build in something over there. We did an example over there, which is Team Finovate, in terms of ensuring that you're not only addressing innovation from the organizational standpoint, but we're also motivating folks in terms of thinking through how can they really add value to the organization by really brainstorming on the ideas and coming on to the situation yourself, and of course leading them in entirety in terms of delivering that as a solution. So we did that too. Coming on to the practice time, my friend, in terms of what does it entails as far as leadership is concerned from the question standpoint that you may see in exam. I've given a situation to you, and then let's think about how do we answer that from the examination standpoint, and of course how can we apply the knowledge that we've learned by now onto these kind of questions, and how can we best resolve it. So let's just deep dive. Steve is the head of HR with Apple Inc. Okay. Before Apple, Steve was colonel in Army. Okay. Over a period of time, his personality took a shift, and Army was into his blood and style, which is fine. Ordering comes naturally to him. In addition to the Army style, penal work was given for non-performance. Okay. It was difficult when he started in Apple, since his previous style of management has not been well received by new staff. Okay. His Army style ordering coupled with push to improve things resulted in dissatisfaction amongst the team members. He started doubting on how Apple can be this much innovative, and how so much time is spent in meetings, consultations, and resolving these conflicts / dissatisfaction. Required Using an appropriate theory of management style, write an email to Steve explaining why he is experiencing the difficulties and recommend the kind of management style that might be appropriate. Now, is this a situation which is unique, which you have not seen anywhere, wherein you have given a situation in a company wherein somebody has a particular style, and the style that is being mentioned over here, in terms of he being there and having the army mindset and believing in terms of ordering, believing in terms of getting things done, and of course penalizing people and so on and so forth. Is it something you have not seen anywhere? Not the case, right? You may have seen it somewhere. Is it something that you have not seen from the standpoint of improvement area in somebody? No, you have seen that. But what you would not have seen is something that is being asked in the requirement. That you have to write an email to this person recommending that what he should be doing and recommending what is the appropriate course of action and helping that person to come up and improve him. That is something that you would not have done, because we are not used to. We have seen the issues. We have seen that bosses like this or issues like this, and we may have also communicated to the leadership that this is something that is being observed and we would need improvement in a very informal way. But in the exam, in these kind of situation, examiner may ask you to write an email, write a report, write a briefing note, etc., etc. So examiner may ask you different things, and we'll learn as we go forward the kind of things the examiner asks and so on and so forth. But important is that if you have to communicate something like this, how will you communicate? Now see this is again a typical question, like an exam question, wherein examiner will not ask you about a theory. Examiner will not ask you about a concept, but examiner asks you about the practical applicability of a concept, which you can only do if you understand the issue. And for understanding the issue, you really need to understand the theory. And once you have understood the theory, you have understood the issue, you can give a recommendation as to how to improve it. And that is what is required over here, that you really have to think through that what the issue has been over here, which we know, autocratic style, do as I say and so on and so forth, not relevant. One should improve, become more participative. We all understand that. So we have understood the theory, we have understood the implication of it, we have understood what the recommendation would be. Now the essence would be how to communicate. And all I can tell you, my friend, this exam is nothing but the most commonsensical exam in this world. One of the most, I would say. And you can only do well in this if you have a strong acumen to apply your logics and journal knowledge, and at the same time you have a very strong communication skill. So what we do in our classes would be, we will of course learn the concept, we'll learn how to practically implement that, and at the same time we will also learn in terms of how to best write it in the best of the best communication skill perspective, so that examiner, what he really wants to test you, and one of the key area in the SBL exam, that they really want your communication to be the best. And when I say communication, it is not about your English, it is not about your vocabulary, no, not required. And for the non-English speaking people, let me tell you, who do not have the English as their first language, you should just not be worried about this, because they are not testing English, they're testing in terms of your style, in terms of you communicating logically, clearly, concisely, precisely, and so on and so forth. And that's what is important. And that's what I'll be taking up in all of my sessions, in all of what we will do. In the question marathon, we will answer the various questions of the past examinations and whatnot, just to give you a perspective as to how you can best answer it. And that is what is relevant from the examination standpoint, that you really need to know as to what is important for you from the examination standpoint. And you will only understand that once you have that hang of it and feeler of it as to what is more important for you. So don't worry, we'll get into the details and we'll get into each and every concept per se. Now imagine in this case, what you really need to write. You need to write an email, right? And of course, people like you, me, who are coming from say official background or
or the industry background, I'm sure some of you would be working, and some of you who are not, who will start working very soon, they will also realize that in the offices or in the organization, email writing is it's just not very tough, right? We are very used to writing emails, but when it comes to writing something like this as an email, it's just not easy. Because if you're writing somebody recommending that, you know what, these are the faults that you have, these are the improvements that you would need to do, and so on and so forth, you really need to be very cautious in terms of, you know, what you say, how you say, and, you know, the way you communicate. And that's what we need to learn. Over here also, what is important is that you really need to write an email. So when we're writing an email, the first thing that you really need to know in the exam is what is the format that you need to follow for writing an email. And there is a separate discussion that we would have on the formats that are relevant in the SBL exam as we move forward. So we have various sessions being attached to it, and one of the sessions we'll talk on various formats. That one of the various formats that you should have in your exam, you should learn from your exam standpoint. We'll learn that, but what is being asked over here is that you need to write an email. What is that email has a format? Email has a format of something like this. You need to have of course, who you're writing an email. Then you need to have from, as to who is writing that email. Then you need to have date, and then you need to have subject. If you really, you know, see your email box, when you open up the compose in the email, whether you're in any organization or whether you're doing it via Gmail, Ymail, or whatever, you have this component by default. By default you'll have to, by default you'll have from, by default there is a date, by default there is a column of subject which you need to write, and so on and so forth. But when you're writing in the exam, there is nothing called by default. You have to write it. You have to write it as if you understand the format of the email, and as if you're writing an email, what that email will take you to write. So if I'm writing an email and I have to write an email on a Word format, so in the exam also you may get to see a piece of paper on which you need to write, or you may get to see a word processor in which you need to write. If you need to write on, you know, an email, what you will start off with, say to, and you will say name as to who you're sending. In this case it will be Steve. Then you will say from. In this case it will be, if you have given a name, you write your name, whatsoever is given in the requirement or the question. If you have not given the name, you may write your own name. What is your name right now at this point in time? And you may want to write the date. If the date is given in the question, write the date of the question. If your date is not given in the question, write the date of exam, which is absolutely fine, or mention it for today. Subject in this case is, you know, we know you have to write a subject. In this case, subject would be, and that's what I have always pushed, is management style, or can be some suggestion on the management style. So we can write management style, or we can write some suggestion on the management style. Now, one thing which I really want to touch upon from the email standpoint, whatever you may see in an email in the exam, if anyway you have to write any recommendation email, any kind of communication that you have to have with someone who you are really recommending something, I would always say that you have to follow the concept of PSOSP. Now, what does that mean? You will start off with P, then come on to S, then come on to O, then come on to S, and then come on to P. PSOSP. What does that mean? By P I mean you should always do a positive start. What does that mean? Positive start means that when you are starting something, especially in the case wherein you have observed something and you are recommending something, you should always start off with a positive note. Positive note is something which is super important for writing an email, and you would have seen even in our offices that even if there is a nasty email coming your way, start and the end will always be positive and always be helpful, seemingly helpful, that you really need to do. And that's what we will do, that we'll start off with positive and we end again with positive. So we'll have positive start and positive end. You surely need to ensure that you remind this whenever you're writing any kind of recommendatory email to anyone, you know, which really goes, or even any other kind of email. These PSOSP can be followed there, because it certainly helps in terms of communicating what you really need to communicate.
because it set the stage for you as to what you really have at your mind. See, the beauty of SBL exam is that they will ask you something in the form of a format. Of course, one is to know the format. Then comes the second problem which every student faces, that how to structure my answer or how to frame my answer. And we'll discuss each and everything like this in the in the questions that we'll do, and of course in detail in the question marathon, because that is where we'll touch upon the past examination questions also. We'll touch upon that from the standpoint that if you really have to deal with the scenario that you may see in the exam, what is the best possible way of structuring it. And that's what we're doing over here, that if you really want to structure something like this in terms of structuring a thought or structuring an idea to get to the right answer, what that would be. So you'll start off with the positive, you'll end up with the positive. So positive start and positive end. Then the second thing that you would do is the setting the stage. Setting the stage means giving examiner what this is all about. So it's like setting your stage on which you'll start playing. Then coming up to the observation. So once you have given the positive start, you have set the stage, you'll give your observation as to what your observation of this scenario is all about. And once you have given the observation, you will do solution. Solutioning, or I would say recommendation, whatever you want to say. So you may want to say solutioning or you want to say recommendation. I always say solutioning. So that is what my PSOSP is all about. You will start off with positive start. You will give the observation. You set the stage. You'll give the observation. You will give the solutioning or recommendation, and you will close it positively. And that's what, when you'll see the solution now, you will realize, because that's how we have operated. That's how we have worked it out, that this is how you need to follow. If you have PSOSP in your mind, probably you'll have the right structure in your mind in terms of how do you structure it when you get to see something in the exam, and that's what is super important for you from the examination standpoint. Now coming on to the situation, we know the situation that autocratic leadership style, we have to recommend, we know that we have to write an email. So what we have done by now is, we have learned that we have to give two, so we'll give two to Steve. We know that we have given, we have to given from, so we know that, from, of course, XYZ. Then we have to give the date, wherein we can write specifically if it is given. If not, we can mention it today. We can, of course, give subject, which is like management style, or can be some suggestion on management style if the case may be. Then what we need to do, we have to give PSOSP. Now P. Number 1, hope my email finds you in good health. Just wanted to share some observation with you. This is only positive start I was talking about. This was the only positive start. Hope my email finds you good. Hope my emails finds you in good health. Hope everything is fine at your end. Hope everything is going good at your end, and so on and so forth. So you can choose out anything and everything that you may want, but start has to be good. It's an official email, my friend, and it has to come up in the official way. You have to have a positive start to it, which is this. So you have done your P. Coming on to your setting the stage. How will you set the stage? In this case, how will you set the stage? I will set the stage by giving the context, which is what? Let's go. As you know, management style is one of the most important factors of the success of team and organization. There are different models of management style followed by different leaders. I'm only setting the stage as to why I'm talking about the management style. It's more like setting the stage. And after that, what I will give is, I will give my observation. So what I have done over here, I've already given my setting the stage. I've already given the perspective as to what that is. Wanted to politely share with you that your management style can be described as an autocratic style. This means that you are telling your team what to do and how to do. This style of management probably comes natural to you, since it is common style in the armed forces. Considering your tenure in army, it is obvious that you got used to the same and hence become your natural style. Team that you are supervising in HR department, however, may well be professionally qualified people used to carry out tasks in their own way without great deal of supervision. With these kind of team members, an autocratic style is unlikely to be successful since team will resent to the reduction in the amount of flexibility and decision making they are used to. You may find it more useful to adopt a participative management style. What I've moved on, I've shifted the gear. I've started off with P, I've started off with the S. Then what I've done, I have given my observation as to what my observation had been. And then I suddenly moved to solutioning, my friend, wherein what I've said that you may find it more useful to adopt a more participative management style in which employees can also participate in the decision making process rather than being imposed. This should lead to greater work contentment with resulting gains in productivity and morale. Is that clear? Absolutely, sir. You will start off with the positive start. You will set the stage in terms of giving the context. You will set the stage. Once you have set the stage, you will move on to your observation as to what observation you have in this kind of situation. And then once you have given the observation, you will come on to the solutioning. That, once I have seen this, what the solution is, that you should adopt the participative style wherein you have to give your team a chance to talk and contribute and so on and so forth. So once they do that, that will certainly help in terms of you having a more positive feedback, team being more fruitful, more contribution and so on and so forth. Also wanted to share with you that this is not going to be an easy journey. This is the classic thing that you should have. Once you are giving a recommendation, once you know that you are giving a recommendation, you should always try and equip the person and tell them or pacify them that, it's not going to be easy, but I'm there to help you. That is the pure corporate style of communicating these things, because you really have to help and support people in terms of doing well. Of course, you're pinpointing the holes, you're pinpointing the gaps, but at the same time, you're not saying that you're not helpful or you're not supporting. You are supporting there. So this is what this entire positive close is all about, that you will close it in a way that, I'm there to help you, I'm there to support you, we understand the situation, but we are there to help you, we will definitely handhold you, we will definitely mentor you and whatnot. That is what the positive close is all about, that you're not only finding holes, but you're certainly helping somebody to get out of it, to close the gaps, what you have observed. Also wanted to share with you that it is not going to be an easy journey and you may face some difficulties in changing your management style, which is fine. That I know I may see difficulties in terms of changing my management style, which is okay. It is human to take time for changing these styles. I'm pacifying again and again. However, these difficulties can easily get over by your recognition and openness to change. I'm demanding that, you will do it, you can do it, but you need 1, 2, 3 things. If you will have the openness to change, if you'll have the recognition of the issues that you have, if you have the openness to change yourself, then you can surely change it. We can also work together in dealing with this change, and if needed, a mentor can also be provided to help you discuss the practical ways in which your style can evolve. I hope you have found the above helpful. Please do not hesitate to get in touch if you require any further information. Warm regards or regards XXX. What I have done, my friend, I have somewhere positively closed it too. This is the PSOSP concept I was talking about. You have to have the positive start, like what we did over here. We set the stage by giving the context. We will give our observation. We will also give a solutioning in terms of what the recommendation would be. Once we have done that, then we'll positively close it. We'll try to pacify, we'll try to guide, we'll try to mentor, we'll try to support as much as possible, and then close positively. Warm regards XYZ. That's what you do in these kind of situations. That is what I was talking about, that knowing the concept, knowing the theory is just not the only important thing. You really need to know various other things in this exam, whether it is a format, whether it is the logical structuring, whether it is the thought that you really need to have and put it on the piece of paper. It is important in terms of how should you do it. And that's what we'll be covering. That's what we'll be covering in the class in terms of the questions that you will do, and of course in the question marathon in terms of what all we'll touch upon there as far as concept, past examination, exam standard questions are concerned. We'll talk on that in detail, along with the various professional skills also that you need to have from this exam standpoint, and of course various formats that you need to deal with. That was it, my friend. I wanted to cover in the leadership. I'm sure once you'll practice this more, you will realize that how this PSOSP help you. It will not only help you in exam, but it also helps you in your real life scenario standpoint when you will deal with various situations in your office, because most of the office emails or the professional emails or the corporate emails are also on the same lines. You will always see something like this. So I'm pretty sure you'll appreciate and you'll understand that. Follow this. It is not only helpful from the examination standpoint, but it will be super helpful to you from the overall professional standpoint in your organization. That's what it, my friend. I think we did a good job in terms of covering the whole context, and we have also revised it. So imagine we have done it and we have revised it too. Leadership is on blood, my friend. It is in the blood now. We all know the traditional theories, the contingency theories, the types of leadership, the participative, the approaches of leadership, the participative, the democratic, the persuasive, the autocratic leadership style. We have learned the transactional, transformational leadership. We have learned the inter and intrapreneur, and so on and so forth. So we have completed everything that was there in leadership, my friend. And we have also practiced a question. That is what we wanted to cover today, my friend. Thank you very much, and see you again in the next session, which is again leadership, which is again of the syllabus area A. We'll touch upon the culture. Till then, this is Pankaj Dhingra signing off.